Hi everybody, this is Darryl One, Music Director of the Victoria Symphony Orchestra, and I'm here to talk about a question that I get asked many times, and that is, how do we plan symphony programs? How do we decide what repertoire to play? How do we put together in a season? So I thought I'd go through at least what I do, at least some of the different factors that go into planning a symphony orchestra season. But before we go about actually planning one, and we're going to do that in a minute, let's just talk about the factors that one needs to take into consideration when planning an orchestra program. So this is what I mean by program. I mean, you come to hear a concert and you hear several pieces for that night. That's what we call a program. And of course that program is put together in conjunction with several other programs. So there's lots of things that you need to know. So let's go through 8 points for planning a symphony program. Number one is cash. How much money do you have? I mean, if you're the Chicago Symphony and you've got $100 million plus in budget, then you could probably do more programs and bigger programs than, say, I can do here in Victoria. So first question is, how much money do you have? Second, what are the ability of your players? Some community orchestras have volunteers in it. Some orchestras are like Chicago or Berlin, where everybody's a professional and they're the top players in the world. And there's the rest of us that fall someplace in between there. So you have to know, how good are your players? Number three, desires. What are the tastes of your core audience? After all, we are sustained by the attendance and the goodwill of the people who want to come to hear us. So if they all love hearing Mahler, then you give them lots of Mahler. If they don't like hearing Tchaikovsky, then you don't play any Tchaikovsky. You have to take that in mind. After all, nobody drives an Edsel right now. There's a good reason for that. Okay, history. What has the orchestra done? How many of these pieces have they played in the past? You don't want to play the Mozart Symphony No. 40 if you just played it last year, or maybe in the last 5 years. And you just have to decide what the tolerance is for bringing a piece back. Some audiences may think that if it's in the last 10 years, it may be too early to bring it back. And there's others that would say, I don't care, I'd like to hear the Beethoven Fifth every year if I could. So you have to figure that out. What's your tastes, the core audience? Then there's the taste of the orchestra. We want to make them happy too and want to play. It isn't just a paycheck. A lot of them play because they love playing. And there's certain repertoire that they've always wanted to play, so we have to keep that in mind. May not be the number one reason, but we do want to keep that in mind. And then there's finally the music director, like myself. There are pieces I'd like to conduct too. So that factors in, although it should be much less. I should be the least in determining the repertoire, the orchestra next, and then of course the audience being the paramount importance. Okay, time. How much time do you have to do a concert? Depends on the hall and its availability and size. As far as number of concerts, as far as timing, some audiences like a shorter concert. Some don't mind if it's longer. Some like to have a mix. So there's a standard 2 to 2.5 hours that most orchestra concerts do, but there's a move recently towards making the concerts shorter, say 2 hours or less than 2 hours, including the intermission and all the pieces in it. So you have to decide what time is available. Availability, what about the music itself? You may find that the music that you're looking for isn't available. Say it's a rental piece, it's a hot piece, it's a new piece, and it's all out, so you can't get it right away. And that happens with Solace doing a particular concerto, or any music that is not public domain yet. And it isn't just new stuff that's not public domain. Aaron Copland and Leonard Bernstein's music is very popular, and that's not public domain yet. So you have to find out if it's available. If it's a centenary and it's a Bernstein centenary or a Copland one or whatever, then you're going to find that their pieces are being rented by other groups and it's not available. So you need to know availability. Okay. Number 7, soloists. Who are your soloists going to be? What's in their repertoire? When are they available? Now, if you're a big orchestra, you can afford to have Yo-Yo Ma. But if you're a smaller orchestra, you can't afford to have him. So you have to look for not the A-level artists, but you have to start looking at B-level artists or C-level artists. The good thing, though, is that with the proliferation of conservatories and music schools and competitions, the level of playing has gone up considerably. So the difference between a C player and an A player is not as great as you might think that it is. Actually, the A players are really up there, but it's just that the B's and C's, instead of being A, B, C, now it's A, B, C. So there isn't as big a difference between them in terms of ability, but the C players are the ones that aren't very well known, and they want to be played. They want playing all the time, and so they're more affordable and they're more available. And eventually, they probably won't be if they rise up to the top. But you still need to know what's your budget for the soloists, of course, but who are your soloists, what's in their repertoire, when are they available. Just because you want to do the Beethoven Violin Concerto doesn't mean the soloist you pick has that in their repertoire or even wants to play that piece. And who are your soloists? Are you going to have violin, a cello, a kazoo? Whatever you want. You got to pick and you got to decide. And finally, number 8, the fit. What is the logic of all these pieces as it relates to the entire season? One program can't just stand by itself. It has to have some connection, some coherency with the rest of the season. Or at least that's the way I like to do it. I mean, sure, some people could just throw together one program and another and have no relation to it whatsoever. But as many of you know here in Victoria, I'd like to sometimes do themes for the entire season. So you have to tie something together. And it makes it more interesting to have a theme to follow. It makes it better for marketing, to market the programs. All those things. So from time to time, I like to do that. So you have to decide what is the fit as it relates to concerts in the rest of the season. And that's not only just in the repertoire, but also it can be money. You know, if I want to do, say, one of those big, huge Mahler symphonies, then that means that one of the other concerts probably needs to be a Mozart program or maybe a Baroque program with less numbers of players so we can balance that out. Or if we're doing a lot of rental music, then I can't do that one big piece at the end. So we have to balance those things out. So what's the fit? Okay, so those are the 8 points. One more time. What's your cash ability, desires, history, time, availability, soloists, and fit. So we're trying to figure all those things out. So let's pretend for our programming exercise here that, number 1, cash. Your orchestra is large enough for an occasional larger than normal size instrumentation, and you can only afford 1 B-level artist, maybe 2, and then a couple of Cs. Okay. Ability. Say your orchestra is made of freelance players from a couple of major metropolitan areas with college experience or professional experience, or similar or better groups. So they're not the players that were pilfering from the Berlin Philharmonic, but they are freelance players that sub for, say, the major orchestra in the next town over once in a while, or opera, but they're also available to play with you sometimes. So we have varying abilities, but professional ability. Desires. Let's say that our audience is a conservative audience with conservative listeners, great interest in classical music, but little or no formal training. History. Say the history is 5 subscription concerts, one of which is a Pops, and say your orchestra has played the standard repertoire, Beethoven 5, Tchaikovsky 5, Brahms 1, all those particular ones. Say that you played most of these pieces within the last 5 to 10 years, and that the repertoire for the orchestra has been mostly late classical, romantic, and early 20th century music. Okay, nothing too much on the fringes, not too much Baroque, not too much of the heavy modern music. Okay, time. Say your concert starts at 7:30 and you're moving towards the 2-hour or less kind of timing. Okay, availability. Let's say that rental is expensive, so we're just going to cut rental out altogether. We're going to go with public domain, and we're going to borrow music, or we're going to use music that we already have in our library. Let's say, as I said, with soloists, we can have all these C-level soloists and maybe an occasional B, but as I said before, The C-level soloists are very, very good. And then finally the fit. Well, that's to be determined. So we're going to take all those factors that we put together, and we're going to try to put together a symphony program. So now let's move on to another thing that we need to know, and that's resources.